Welcome back to Advanced Scout, or welcome for the first time. If it's the first time you're tuning in with us. I'm James Bigton. I'll be your host today. And what we do at Advanced Scout is going to customer research and research generally as a whole. And what we're very passionate about is understanding our audience and testing our products on our audience. So we make sure that when you're doing that work, you have great success. You make something that people actually want. We're really passionate about that. And we're very lucky today to have an expert with us on that exact thing. Arunima is our expert today. She's got a very, very rich history. I'm very excited to speak to her. Arunima's been at IDEO, been at a few other agencies I really respect as well. And the subject we're going to talk about today is COVID-19 and the impact that's had on research. And Arunima suggested that to me, and I just thought that was a really, really good thing to dig into, because it's probably something that nobody's really even understood. It's just kind of transitioned into maybe different ways of doing research since COVID-19. But look, enough from me. Let's hear from Arunima. And Arunima, if you can just give us an intro, if you can maybe also tell us where this kind of passion for research and innovation came from. Maybe it came from an early age, and then after we've done the intro, we'll get into the topic. Yeah, over to you.
Amazing. Thank you, James. It's lovely to be here, and thank you for inviting me. So just a tiny bit of background for our listeners. So I've been working in the innovation insight strategy space for about 18 years. And in that time, and mostly all in the UK. And actually the weird part is that it didn't start in childhood, though I was always very curious. So I guess most kids are. But I actually just fell into the job because I finished a master's at LSE and in media and gender, and then just needed a job and a visa to stay in the country. And I happened to get a wonderful job at a company called Promise who sponsored my visa. So that's how I got into research and innovation, completely by accident. But I had stuck to it for 18 years because I absolutely love it. It does help that I'm naturally extremely talkative. So I talk too much, and I can talk to anybody and everybody about all kinds of things, which is really important for a researcher. So just having the ability to have a conversation, and that's what I think makes a person a good researcher. Now that I've done it for a long time, I think it is exactly that natural conversation, which I feel has been kind of lost since COVID-19, because even though talking like this on a screen is wonderful and very useful for lots of reasons, I think having a conversation with people face to face and being able to see their body language, their reactions, their context has disappeared in large part since we've moved to what seems like a predominantly virtual research world. But that's just a quick intro on my thoughts, but I'll let you ask some more questions and answer them more directly.
Yeah, I guess let's get into it then, right? Let's begin, because you suggested this subject, and I immediately jumped on it because I thought it was a really interesting thing in that you've got people who've been doing research for I guess pre-COVID, who've seen the transition. Then you've got new people who've come to research and they don't even understand the transition. And I guess fundamentally, what has changed in the way that the research is conducted in terms of where were we pre, and then where and how are we now in terms of post? And also, what was happening? Did you see when COVID was happening as well? What kind of small changes did you see? Yeah.
Of course, yes. So because I started off my career essentially around 2007, what I learned from research was entirely face-to-face, in fact. So my training was in entirely face-to-face research methodologies, and that could be one-to-one interviews, or it could be focus groups, or it could be huge workshops with up to 50 to 100 people, which I used to moderate
Wow.
regularly, like co-creation workshops. In my first job, I was working for a whole year with the Dubai government on helping develop a healthcare system. And we did 26 massive workshops in a year that kind of brought together nurses and doctors and staff and insurance people and employers to co-create a brand new healthcare system. Unfortunately, the recession hit and it didn't progress as we would have liked. However, what I learned about research and what I learned from the best, I think, a person called Roy Landmaid, who was a very senior consumer psychologist and researcher. And he said something which I think I carried with me, which was relationships are the source of results. So when you meet people and you form a relationship, you kind of have this direct connection with those people. I've done research where I've gone and interviewed people who've been recently bereaved, or I have interviewed people kind of who have just overcome addiction. I've interviewed all kinds of sensitive subjects. And even though it's much harder to do face-to-face, I remember going into their homes, seeing their context, them sharing pictures with me about their experiences, showing me objects, in their home, taking me to different spaces and being like, this happened here or that happened here. And even though it may not be comfortable for all researchers, I remember a lot of those interviews ending in hugs. I remember the people reached out to me and said, can I give you a hug? Because it felt like getting therapy, because what you do as a researcher is give your full attention to somebody. Face to face, you're sat there, you're listening intently. Nobody in our daily lives listens that intently to us or cares about what we say, right? Most of the time, people are half listening. But you are there, active listening to somebody, and they feel valued. And it is like a bit like a therapy session for them. No matter what you're talking about, it could be a banking app, or it could be, about life-changing things. But that is, for me, the biggest value, the context, the human connection. And when COVID hit, I was working at IDEO, and we had this amazing kind of relationship with Ford Motor Company. We were doing lots of different projects with them. We had a co-creation lab that we had created together. We were constantly doing this human-centered design work. We had built a massive rig for their kind of commercial vehicles, and we'd have people and they'd come into the studio and we'd do testing, and everything was face-to-face, was live, was tangible. And I'm not going to lie, we felt suddenly lost. I mean, we were scrambling. We were like, what do we do now? We can't stop working. We don't know when this will end. At some point, I think everyone believed it will never end. When we were think of it, we just thought, oh my God, will we ever see people again? And then what happened was we actually launched a full project on this. So we helped develop a remote research guide. We interviewed loads of people, anyone from journalists who work in like war zones and how they get information from afar, or from people who are running charities, or other design researchers. We did a massive piece of work, and we learned a lot from that piece of work. And of course, like anything, we learned there are pros and cons, right? So let's say we lost kind of the face-to-face angle, which is a pity. But what we gained was that we had access to way more people than we had before. So very often I would be, the beginning of my career, I was traveling all over the world, which I absolutely loved, and going to all these different places and meeting people and seeing the country and learning not just about them, but their culture, which was deeply valuable. But it also meant we had to restrict how much research we could do, right? So, and how many countries we could travel to, and the numbers we could speak to, and all of that. So suddenly the world opened up, right? Anybody with an internet connection you could speak to, which was absolutely wonderful. And that meant that we could also have maybe slightly larger sample sizes. However, I'll go back and forth, because clients started expecting that we'd do 6-7 interviews a day. There was complete burnout. They're like, oh, just do lots. And including the companies were just like, just do it faster and quicker. And, it was almost hard to listen, concentrate, download the interview, go to the next one. Because when you're doing it face to face, you have a break in a weird way. So you travel to a place and there's anticipation, you spend time thinking about the interview, you go in, you conduct the interview, then you get back into some mode of transport, and straight away the team and I would be talking about, oh, what did we learn, and we'd take notes and do a quick download in the taxi or whatever. Then we'd get there to the next interview, and there was time to prep, decompress, think, and learn. And it became a bit back to back. Like, there was a point where we had to push back, that I was like, I can't do more than 4 interviews a day. I'm just not going to. And people are like, well, there's 8 hours. What? It was kind of, people lost any empathy or any sense for like the craft. It was just like, let's just get this done, you know? And the other thing that was lost is, what about people without internet? Do we no longer care about them in research? You know, I know that I know majority of the world is connected, but back in the day, I did some research for Finca, which is a microfinance charity. And we traveled to Tanzania and we interviewed people who were living on less than $2 a day. And we went to their tiny homes with 3-4 belongings, and we had a translator, and we were trying to communicate, and we had long interviews because the communication took a long time. And it showed us like, okay, it was so stark, James, to be there and see this person owns only like 4 things total. And I'm not exaggerating, right? And I would never reach those people in a COVID world, right? And even post-COVID, the thing that I've lamented is that I absolutely think remote methodologies are crucial, they're important, they're here to stay, as they should. But my issue is that I think we just default to them. We no longer think about, what do we want to learn? Who do we want to learn it from? And what is the best way to learn from these people? Because in the past, I would always design methodologies based on the audience. So if I'm doing research in India, everybody's on WhatsApp all the time. So the best way is texting or WhatsApp, okay? If I'm doing some research in China, we have to use WeChat as well. How do we record videos? Where do we get different information from? We used to think about our user and what was best for them, and then design the research, you know? And we'd have translators and moderators, and God, it was complicated. But I felt like there was a kind of necessity in that. Now, if you're getting answers in another country and you're just translating by AI, you don't have a human telling you what is the sentiment, the translator telling you what's the sentiment this person is trying to convey, because there's one word that is untranslatable, but AI is doing its best, and then you're no longer getting any nuance. Sorry, I can go on and on. I don't want to be on a monologue, but I can continue on a monologue, or if you're more curious about some aspect, I can dive deeper.
But monologue is great. I think the listeners would rather hear from you than me, in all honesty. And I think there's several really interesting things you've touched upon, that nuance especially, in terms of designing the research methodology as such, the how, to be correct for that particular participant.
Indeed.
And taking a step back, I totally agree with you. I think that we've got into like a default mode in terms of, right, we're going to run 50 research sessions, we're going to set up the calls, we'll do that, X, Y, and Z, especially working in BP global organizations like we have as well, like global organizations like BP. And it's so much easier, I guess, to jump on calls. It's more cost effective in terms of we're reducing travel. We're being good for the environment as well, in a way.
Of course,
right. But I think there is a lot of nuance because that's lost, because there's a lot of things that you find when you're having a more natural conversation with someone in person that you don't necessarily have in that almost artificial construct of this type of video call. In terms of, things will just fall out of the conversation. Something may happen, or it may be the way that they're if it's a particular way of doing something and you're doing something called shadowing, I think, as we talked before, where you're
Yes.
just observing them, and you have to, okay, you could probably do it in a technological way where you have a camera on them and you're
Mm,
viewing the camera, but still there feels like a wall between you and that person. And
indeed.
you lose the opportunity to kind of ask them those questions around how they're doing something,
Yeah.
about what it is, and seeing the bigger picture. And
Yeah.
I guess what for you, and I think you've mentioned already, but what for you are the kind of the things that have been lost? And maybe it is
Yeah.
this nuance that we've talked about
Yeah.
in terms, and also methodologies that you've seen are just not
Mhm.
used anymore, but actually provide a huge amount of value.
So I think the biggest loss has been in ethnographic research, because I think that, yes, there's a lot of tech out there that enables you to do ethnography, and you can do self-diary studies, and you can do
Yeah.
observation, you can ask someone to take you around the house. So I'm not saying that it's not possible, but I think context and ethnography are so important in learning about people's real lives. So you can ask someone to be like, okay, can you tell me about your journey with your kids to school and what that feels like and where do you stop off and what happens, right? And they can narrate that. But it's only when you're there that you think, okay, now you've got one parent, they're trying to strap in three kids. They can't fit in three car seats at the back. So they're struggling. And then someone wants a snack and now they need to stop for someone to pee. Or, the chaos of the morning, that if you're there in their home, you can see like someone's making breakfast and some things are falling apart and some things are going really well and someone's kicking off and other one is singing, or, it's like that chaos, that context that you're designing for is completely lost. And in fact, I was talking to somebody and they were talking about, okay, you're researching how people are in a forecourt, how they're charging their vehicles, right? Now, in one, they had put in kind of a path for cars to turn. Here is where you're charging, and here's the shop. Sorry, I'm using my hands now. So here's where you're charging, here's the shop, and there's a path in the middle. Now, what you've done is you've put an obstruction between the car and the shop. So now you've got a parent or someone trying to cross with a child who's just left the shop, and you've got cars coming through, and now there's a potential danger, and you didn't do the research and context. You just ask people, how did you find the charging experience? So they might only tell you about, oh, it was easy. I just went in, I used my card, I charged it, it was fine. You don't get any of the context of how difficult they found it to navigate the whole of that space. And that's the kind of stuff that we've completely, I wouldn't say completely lost, I don't want to be over dramatic, but we've lost a lot of that. And this comes up again and again. And if you are designing as a designer, so as a design researcher, what has been my job? It's been my job to provide amazing insight so we can get to great design. Now, I'm
Yeah.
not able to provide as good insight if I don't have as good context, because that part is completely missing. The other thing I want to talk about is the research is not just conducting that one conversation, right? So there's a lot of setup. There is taking stakeholders along. I remember like traveling with a load of BA clients to Mumbai and going
Okay.
there for a big workshop and navigating the city with them. And they were like, how are you crossing the road? Like, we don't get it. So for context, I'm Indian, for those who are listening. And they're like, it's
I've
like,
been to
you
India
get it.
before. I've experienced that
Yeah.
myself. Yeah.
Yeah. And everyone was like, when you cross the road, it's like parting of the Red Sea, because you just start walking and then we just follow you and then everyone stops. And if you don't do that, you can't cross the roads. How do you know about how people live and travel unless you have actually gone there? And
Yeah.
please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you always need to go there or that you always have to be present. But the fact that we've started defaulting to absence, that is my problem with this situation. Now, I take all these clients, they'd have this cultural experience. I take them to different places, not just do the research, but we do different immersion. We'd understand all kinds of different things. And then attention. So since we started remote research, people show up to the call whenever they like. Sometimes they dip in and out. Sometimes they are late. Sometimes they are typing. Sometimes they're not listening. There are lots of behaviors we do online that we would never do face to face. We don't
Yeah.
multitask. When we are with people in person, we have our pen and paper, we give them our attention. Yes, all our minds wander. We might think about what we want for lunch and we're human, but on average, we're doing better listening and we're paying attention. We're catching the clues. We're not also writing messages. We're not also opening the door and getting the delivery. We're not also interrupting. As a researcher, when we shifted to kind of online methodologies, clients were constantly texting, messaging me in the middle. Can you ask this question? Can you do this? Can you do that? And I was like, I'm trying to pay attention to the person. So now I can't listen either with the best will in the world. So then I had to come up with a whole handbook, which I do have, on how to behave in remote research. That
Oh, wow.
just like in real life, I will ask you and give you space, or I will say, please send your questions and I will ask them when I can. Or this is how you must behave. And we always had it for face-to-face research, where it was like, if you're going to someone's house, please show up 10 minutes in advance, meet us outside, we'll all enter together. How should we introduce ourselves? Do we want to reveal the brand that we're working for? Do we want to what kind of permissions do you want to get? What forms we need to sign in GDPR? And people were present, they were paying attention. Now, suddenly they're like, oh, I invited my colleague to the call. So a random has shown up that I had no idea was going to show up to this interview. And now we've got like 5 people viewing this person. All their cameras are off. So now we're talking to people. We don't even know who they are. And are they snooping? Are they listening? Are they decent people? Where are they from? And if we tell clients you can't have more than 2 people attend an interview, they'd get angry. They'd be like, what's your problem? We're not traveling there. We're just showing up. We'll just come in and listen and turn off our cameras. But it's really disconcerting for the person to have 5 unknown people listening in on a conversation. It's not just doing the research, it's everything around it. How well you listen, how well you discuss after the interview, how much attention you pay, what kind of downloading do you do, how do you get to results? And like synthesis, that's a whole other part, which is having all the clients in the room. And we do great at IDEO, we do these amazing storytelling sessions where we'd go through each and every individual we had met and we'd tell stories, and then they would chime in, yeah, you remember when he did this, or you remember when they did that. And we'd bring these people to life in the room, and we'd work around a board, and we'd kind of do all of those things together. And we still do some of that. And we've got amazing tools like Mural and Miro and lots of other ones. And in some ways, they've made life easy because everyone's on one canvas. Because before we do all this work on flip charts and post it, and I'll take pictures of everything, and then I would try to make sense of it in a physical room. So this is better, right? We have one canvas, but we don't have that spark. We don't have that conversation. So I'll pause for breath, but it's kind of thinking about the whole research journey from when you start designing the research as a design researcher to actually planning what you're going to do, to conducting it, to how you behave after it, to making sense of it, to synthesizing it, and then getting to insight. So it's not just this interaction, it's all of that journey that we should think about.
Yeah, that's a very good points there. And I'm wondering what new techniques or that you have developed in order to be able to handle those situations. Because you mentioned the handbook, obviously, and it'd be I'm sure the audience would love to get their hands on that. But yeah, what kind of techniques have you developed for that? Particularly, I know from those kind of research calls myself, where you have 5 other I can see as their avatar, right, their photo, which is a very odd situation. If we were doing it before in terms of like controlled user testing, you may have like a room. Right, you'd be in a real room, and you'd be you and the tester, and you'd have like a 2-way mirror glass, right, and everyone would be sat behind that. So there's a feeling for people there, but it's not that weird.
It's less intrusive.
Yeah, it's not like that weird 1 foot in, 1 foot out type of feeling. It's less intrusive. So I'm guessing, I'm wondering what kind of tools have you developed yourself to kind of help with those situations? Yeah.
So there's lots of different things across that journey that I mentioned. So one of the first things is starting with the person and the method that we've already talked about. So biggest thing, what is your problem? What are you researching? What are you trying to find out? Research, very clear research objectives that you are aligned with on the different stakeholders. You've all agreed what you want to find out. Then you've agreed who do you want to find that out with. So really strong alignment on the research for it to be successful, okay? And that is true for all research processes, online, offline, it doesn't really matter. Amazing alignment on what we're trying to do and with whom. Then exploring kind of different abilities and technologies, and also budget. So we have X amount of money, this is how we can spend it. Okay. So then you're kind of trying to figure out together, what can we do in person? What can we do remotely, etc. There is, of course, like something that we're using, there is a brilliant kind of software now, be it Microsoft Teams or Zoom or any of the others, where you can do quite effective conversations, where if you can't be there in person, those tools are brilliant, and they're getting better because, of course, you can get a live transcript, you can even get synopsized notes now. If you chuck them into AI, they'll just give you the themes and all of that. So I think all of those tools are immensely helpful. The other thing that I've started doing is also thinking about how and where we synthesize. And I've started setting up very clear. So in one of my roles, I set up a whole practice, right? Like how to do this well. So loads and loads, too many documents on. This is what you send stakeholders. This is how you align. This is how you behave. This is how. So giving people as much guidelines as possible, because you can't do it in person. And then making sure that you have put those best practices in. So some very simple tools are great organization, which is we finish the interview, I'm putting in a 10-minute break and a 20-minute catch-up straight after that. How do I not lose kind of this ability to have that conversation live, and spacing things out and creating a schedule that allow me to mimic as much as possible kind of the real life version. The other interviewing techniques that you can think about is using proxies and doing ethnography in a way where you say, okay, I want to recruit you and your 9-year-old, and I want the 9-year-old to shoot the video while you do the task with all your hands,
That's
right?
Idea.
So for example, and get a different perspective. So get someone else to record you doing the task so you can talk fully and you can have your hands free while we communicate. And you can show me a step by step proper user testing, proper, context. One thing, as I said, relationship building. If it's important face-to-face, it's even more important in a virtual sense. So what I've started doing is trying to build in, where budget allows, multiple interactions with people. So how do we introduce ourselves in advance of meeting them? How do we give them a pre-task that could be written or video or some lovely design stuff where they keep a diary, or we kind of get, so we don't rely on that one interaction to get all our information. One of the beauties of virtual, and there are many, many pros, of course there are, is that you can do longitudinal research more easily. So you can tell someone that the way that it's going to work, you're going to do a little task for us. So I was doing this amazing project for Nespresso. I won't say a lot more about the details of that, but it is coming to market in the UK in 2025, which is what I just heard recently. But what we were doing is asking people, okay, here are X or Y tasks. And we made this beautiful homework pack and we sent it to them, really lovely design. And this is work I did at IDEO. And then we'd ask people to kind of fill their moments, like what's your morning ritual moment, and what your afternoon, and where are you stressed, and what is the role of coffee or whatever it is we're trying to do. So we actually asked them to do lots of pre-ethnography on their lives for us. This was during COVID. So we came up with the idea, and then we had a week in between where we reviewed everything they had done. And then we designed kind of our questions and follow-up, and almost for each person. a bit of deep diving into the moments we had seen. And if we saw them open a packet in a certain way or store things, or like everybody has a favorite mug, and some people were like preheating things and others were just chucking everything in. And, so there's all of these different things that we asked them to do, so that then when we met them, we could probe in certain ways. And then the product that we were trying to test, etc., or develop, after that, we give them a post task as well. So we said, now we want you to go use X or Y and record and tell us what your experience is like. So trying to think about ways to get information from different perspectives. So one of the things we always said, if you're going to someone's house for ethnography, they might tidy up, and then it may not be authentic. On the other hand, when you're on screen, you don't care about any of that, and you just kind of sit on there, you just tidy up behind you, and that's true. However, it's great that you can reach people who are not as comfortable with having people in their homes, right? Or
Yes.
they like a bit of distance, or they're introverted, or they don't want people in their space, or, they might have different challenges that they don't want to be visible. So there's a lot of benefits, like with anything, but it's just about mitigating that and figuring out what is the best way to get the information, and how do we chunk it up? How do we build a relationship over time? How do we kind of mimic the research that we would do in the past, and get it to be as close as we can. So yeah, reporting back. Friendship pairs is another thing we used to do, is get people to report on each other and be like, okay, depending on the research, it's like, okay, so I want you to tell me about this pattern. How would they approach it? And then they approach it, and then you have a chat and be like, why is that different? What's the insight? So there's lots of creative techniques that you can do to kind of do the best you can with the tools we have.
Wow. Okay. There is so much value in what you've just given us. It's unreal. And I think we would be doing it injustice if we didn't dive in a bit deeper and unpack that further with a specific example. Okay, you talked about, I think, a coffee brand. But we don't need to, if that's sensitive, we don't need to talk about that particular. What we're more interested in is the methodology. And why do I say that? And I guess what are the listeners looking for in terms, and also me, quite selfishly, what am I looking for as well? In that there's a theory, I think, that's actually been proven. It is actually been proven by Google, that nobody actually buys from you until the 11th interaction.
So interesting.
Exactly. And I'll dig that out for you and I'll send it to you. That's a lot of interaction, right? And also the likelihood increases if you do it in 4 different places as well. You have meetings in 4 different places. So it might be in WhatsApp as the interaction, it might be the website as the interaction, it might be having a coffee with the person as an interaction. If you actually kind of put some real world interaction there as well, that actually also increases the chances of conversion as well. And what I would like to I guess to understand from you, it probably isn't 11 points, but what are those kind of those interactions? Because we've talked about the one-on-one interview we're doing now, right?
Indeed.
We've talked about exercises that the participant can do before and also post as well. And I'm wondering, is it you do the one-on-one interview very first, or is there 2 or 3 different types of interaction points you do before that? And how and what's the actual flow look like?
Absolutely.
What's the actual flow look like? And a little bit of detail on each of those points.
Indeed. Absolutely. So
because this is why I can understand. This is why I understand actually brings that richness of the more in person research is how you guys developed it to recreate that.
Absolutely. So I think the first point of interaction is finding these people, right? So whether you're using a recruiter or whether you are using, your own resources or LinkedIn, or depending on whatever you're trying to find, like sometimes there's no budget and you do friends and family research, irrespective, there is a first point of interaction, which is you're reaching out to somebody. So we would have craft like the absolute right communication, which is, we'd like to request you, we highly request you to join us for this research. This is the purpose of it. And I strongly believe, and I always tell brands as far as possible, to treat people like co-creators, not respondents or just users. And what does that mean? The big difference in that I like to do when I'm allowed to is share what we're trying to achieve right in the beginning. You are helping us co-create the future of flying, yeah, which is like a project I did. Or you are helping build the next generation of, transit vehicles for Ford. You are helping those people feel that they are part of something important, that their value is high, right? Straight away, all of us love a bit of flattery, and that someone actually cares about our view and is going to use that to have real impact in the world, right? So how you craft that very first message is really important when you reach out to people and saying, you're a valued customer, etc. All of that, which might sound superficial, but it's really important. Then through the recruiter, you'll usually screen, or you will do the screening. Once you've got that person, you communicate again and saying, thank you so much, be it text or be it WhatsApp or be it email, depending on the country, the context, all of that. You would communicate being that really excited to speak to you tomorrow. This is my name, etc., right? However, if you've given pre-work, you're often sending that over, saying the first step in our journey is that we want to learn. Before we bias you by asking lots of questions on the topic, we want to understand what is your morning commute like? Yeah. So you give them some kind of task that they can do. So I've just made that up. Yes, let's say, yeah. And we give them a little diary and we say, take pictures of your commute, moments you feel happy, moments you feel stressed, and do it for a typical week. So you wouldn't just do one day, because, there's lots of anomalies in a day. There's lots of anomalies in a week. But at least if you say, write down your highs and lows, what felt great, what didn't. So you're kind of asking people to observe things that they just do, right? That's the point of ethnography. You're not there to observe. So what you're doing is making them aware that they must observe more carefully. Yeah. So the one thing that I will always do is I always forget, like if I have to, now we have hybrid working. So in the mornings, like when I'm home, I'll take this vitamin or I'll take that or whatever I need to take. The days I'm going into work, I'll never remember to take anything every single time, because it's just a change in schedules. And I've got two schedules. There's no one routine. Everything's changed. So I need to think about that. Or like, oh God, did I remember to feed the cat? Because today I need to go into work. And usually I kind of am home, so I don't need to think about that. So what are people dealing with? Yeah. And you're asking for them to critically self-observe in a very way that we don't usually think about that stuff. Then when you're doing the actual interaction, you often ask them to send it back. And if you're asking people to do a task, you need to put in time in the middle, but then for you to actually review it sensibly and be able to ask them questions and probes based on that. Because one of the fallacies that so many people do is like, let's just do some homework tasks. Homework tasks finished on Thursday, we're talking to them on Friday. You have absolutely no time to review it. You land up in the call and they're like, oh, like I said in my video, and you haven't watched the video. You have no idea what they're talking about, right? You thought you'll do it later. So when you're planning it, everyone makes fun of me for over planning, and I am definitely an overthinker and planner, but it helps me in my job. So actually saying, okay, we're going to have a week off between those two interactions, and we're going to learn in that time. So that when we meet people, we're respectfully listening, we are probing, we're asking people to do something while we observe. We are asking another person to be present, so their hands are not. So like, what I find incredible about these studies, it's like, take a video of yourself. Let's say, so when I was working at Samsung at one point, and it's like, okay, take a video of like you unloading the dishwasher. How are they supposed to do that? No one holds a phone in their hand while they unload a dishwasher, right? And then when we go to their home, we notice that their teenager comes in and they just throw the dish into the thing and goes, and they're like, oh my God, I have to be the chief, tidy upper. Everyone chucks their dishes in, and then I have to go and actually rearrange everything so that the dishwasher can be properly done. So one of the insights we got from that, which we didn't know, there is always a chief dish loader. So no matter what chaos everybody else in the household creates, there's always one person who is somehow in charge of setting things properly and then turning it on, right? And in most households in where there's more than one person, there's always the people getting told off and always. Now, we would never have learned that. They would never have. We would never have learned that if we weren't there in person, because that only came up because someone actually did something at that moment. And then we realized, okay, this is the thing. So we asked that question. So you build your questions and your guide as you learn. Okay. So you don't just kind of go and be like, these are my set questions forever for the whole research. And the one thing I want to talk about, very important, market research and design research, both really, really important. I've done both. Unlike market research, in design research, it's less important how many people you speak to. It's more about the quality than the quantity. Okay. And also the fact that you often recruit specific people for specific reasons. So you do a more biased recruitment. I want someone. So we did this project on the future of pizza and cake. One of my favorite projects. I just traveled the world eating pizza and cake for months. I would definitely one of my top projects. Yeah. And in that, for example, it's very important where you're kind of telling people, exactly, you're kind of observing, you're learning, you're evolving. It is not about being able to compare each interview exactly. It is about getting incredible insight for design from each interaction. But very often people talk about research as a whole big thing. It's not. There's lots of different types. And what is the purpose you're doing it for? Are you doing it for the purpose of learning for design? Then it's a totally different thing. It's not about sample size. It's about finding those extreme people. So we spoke to people who would make kind of pizza dough from scratch and you kind of make the tomatoes and, strain them and get this special cheese, and to like chefs, like top chefs, pizza chefs, to people who will only eat frozen pizza. So we kind of spoke to everyone in between as well to learn. Okay. So the future is not just one thing. It's not just one type of person, one type of user. So you're getting that whole spectrum of people and you're learning deep in each case and you're evolving with each interview. You're not doing it for comparability. Yeah. And that's so important.
Yeah.
And the other thing we would always do is
number of people that you need to speak to when you're doing the more extreme cases for it to be valid. Do you have to hit a certain number, or is one or two just enough?
So I don't know why I say this. I always go with 6. 6 is my favorite number. Again, don't know why. Okay. But also, I kind of feel there is a bit of comparability, as well as you can come to some, because I think 2 is very little. And I think 6 plus is wonderful, but I feel like there has to be, like 3 is always good. So you learn from 2 and then you learn from 1 and you're like, oh, this is the anomaly. I kind of feel like 3 is the absolute minimum and I double that to get to a minimum that I'm comfortable with. But there isn't. It depends on the product. So if you're dealing with a brand or something that's global and spans 20 countries and blah, 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 then you need to speak to at least 20 people. That's your minimum. So first of all, there is no minimum is the answer. It'll be different for each project, each brand, each interaction. But all things being equal, you come to a minimum understanding based on what you're designed for.
Okay, fantastic.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to talk about very quickly was sacrificial concepts. So when you're doing stuff for design, what we would often do is we would just make stuff up. Like crazy ideas.
For example?
So for example, if we're doing this we're doing this one project for a Japanese brand. This is just pre-COVID, yeah? It was about how to get people to touch more. I'm not exaggerating. That was the project.
Amazing.
Okay. And this is pre-COVID. So we came up with all these crazy ideas that you have a museum of touch, or that you have this kind of thing where you have these people, who are like, I think they're paid professionals that you can pay for hugs, or
Okay.
tattoo artists who are also in contact with you, or so we
There,
went
yeah,
crazy.
there was a big
Like,
thing just before COVID around hugs, and you could pay
yeah,
someone to hug you. Yeah, yeah. So it sounds like a
indeed.
similar sphere
Yeah.
and
So we just
zeitgeist.
came, indeed. So we just came up with random stuff. And the point of those random sacrificial concepts is that we want them to be sacrificed, but they'll give us a learning. They'll
Okay.
tell us that this is too much or this is too little or people absolutely hate. So that you take a higher learning from those. You're not testing them to be successful. You're
No.
testing them to learn. So
And
it's
it's
like,
important to go wide and go extreme
mm-hmm.
because even though you may feel or the team feels that there's a high chance it will fail, there's
Yeah.
equally going to be something that you're going to learn from that could be then rolled into the final solution.
Yes, absolutely. And also, like, there's a sneaker, and it's a pity I don't remember the name. Nike did this wonderful project where you had this person who said, I don't remember all the details, which is not helpful. I did use it as an example at some conference, so I should remember more. But
Okay.
the long and short of it, there was a person who loved Nike, but because of the disability that they had, they were not able to put the shoes on and off. It was difficult for them to get them on and off. And basically, they contacted Nike saying, I love your products, but I can't actually use the sneaker that I want. And that led Nike to create kind of these hands-free sneakers, which I don't remember the name of. So maybe we
I've
can
almost
find
bought
it,
them several
put it
times. I
in.
love them. I know
Okay, so
exactly
you
the
know
one
the
you're
one.
talking about.
Okay,
Yeah.
exactly. And that example of one person's amazing need meant that they became some of the most popular sneakers that Nike's ever done. So the point I'm
Yeah,
trying to
the
make is that
reviews are insane underneath it of how
insane,
many
you can't
people
ever
that have
buy
been
them.
waiting for that solution and
Yes,
how many people are
yes,
grateful and absolutely love it. Yeah,
yeah. And like children, all
it pays to
children,
go
they
deep
did.
sometimes into that.
Indeed, and like all children, like or tying laces, or I don't want to ever tie a lace, like never voluntarily. I don't want to use my
My
hands to
son,
wear
yeah,
shoes unless I have to, right? So it's
yeah,
kind of just like, and you're one young children, so my daughter, a 6-year-old, if you want them to dress themselves and be more independent, and you give them things that they can be more independent with, they feel so empowered. And now she's like, no, no, I can get ready myself. You can just do my hair later, right? And that makes her feel good. So you're kind of designing. So I'm not saying that you always test with the many, but you can design with the few.
yes. Okay, perfect. So we've talked about that number question was something I wanted to ask, and I'm really glad that we've covered that as well. And we've also talked about uh, doing research remotely now and how you can do it in a way that does build a relationship
Yes.
with the participant. That whole exercise of giving them tasks to do,
Yeah,
and then and it's important to have time to synthesize the outcome of those
indeed.
tasks before then giving them the
Meeting.
next thing to do or meeting up with them. So
Yeah.
you've actually got content to then talk about, right? You've created a bond pretty much. You've started to create a relationship because
100%.
there's commonalities now. You've both
Yeah.
kind of shared that, yeah, from them doing it and
Yeah.
then you viewing it, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think that's a wonderful way of making remote research work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
indeed.
and it's
And
given me a lot of thought.
I
Yeah.
forgot to cover the post part. I think it's
Oh
really
yeah, let's do it.
important that what you promise people that you do that. So people will ask you, or will you tell me what happens with this? Or can I contact you? Can I ask about this? And if you can't, then you need to be honest. And if you can, then you need to do it. So you cannot make promises to people. So there's also a post interaction, right? It's not, and you always send a message or something saying, thank you, really valued your time, all of that. These are the next steps. We won't be able to tell you, but look out for our product in this year or that time, or giving people that closure and that value end to end. So
Yeah,
very often we never think about the post,
yeah, that's really
right? And how
important.
much joy it gives us when someone says something you did has had value in the world. Sorry, I did interrupt you there. I just wanted to close that loop.
No. That's good. That's perfect. That's good. I'm glad we closed that now. And in terms of the future, what does the future hold, right? Because we've talked about the problem with COVID and what happened. in
Yes.
terms of this video call culture, for want of
Hmm.
for want of a better way of putting it. And we've talked about the handbook that you came up with to then help as a guideline to do that better, and then also a set of methodologies that you came up with and the team came up with, the various teams you've
Yes.
been on,
Oh, everything
to
was a
help
team
with that.
effort.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And and what, so what's for the future, right? Because now we're
Yeah.
living in this world where we're post pandemic, and we understood how it worked before, right?
Yeah.
It was wonderful doing all the flights, and you'd
Yeah.
have a budget, but you'd have to
And
use it
not.
really,
Yeah.
and not.
Yeah.
And now post pandemic, it's opened up this wonderful world of that you can go global quite fast,
Yeah.
but also, like you said, not necessarily everyone's got an internet connection, right? Not
Yeah.
necessarily the audience that you want to learn from don't necessarily have availability to digital tools.
Hmm.
So what's the future looking like for research and
So
these kind of different
what
methodologies?
So what I don't want to do is predict the future because I've never done that or have the ability, but I can say what I
No.
hope the future can be, right? So
Yeah.
what I
If
would
you had a
hope
magic
it
wand.
would be if I had a magic wand and what I hope for. So what
Yeah.
I would hope is that we go back to thinking about clearly of repeating myself, what are our objectives? What do we want to achieve and who do we want to learn from? That we then start to go back to designing the research from scratch, not only for that project, but for the individual that we're trying to speak to, that we take full use of all the wonderful tools that are out there for, there's so many companies have stepped up and come up with amazing collaborative tools that are virtual, that we continue to use those. But we always ask ourselves, what is the value of doing this method in the way that we are? Are we better off face to face or are we better off in person? Or what about the percentage? So our budget, let's be creative. Our budget just said, use mixed methodologies. I will only get to I can speak to 2 people in London face to face. Fine, I don't have the budget to travel the rest of the world. And kind of the economy we're living in, at least in the UK, which is very difficult, very challenging, doom and gloom. There's a lot of layoffs still happening since COVID and after
Yeah.
Brexit. I don't want to go into political views, but disaster. So I just think thinking about what a difficult time we're living in, I'm not going to wish that we all go back to the plane, to traveling constantly around the world, which is also terrible for the planet. But what I do wish that we do is we find a balance. What do we need to find out? How do we need to find it out? What is richer in person? What is richer actually virtually? And okay, so if we want to reach people without internet, we'll just travel to them and everybody else we can speak to on the phone. Or we'll come up with creative tasks so we get to know these people over a long period of time. So I think that we remember
Or buy them a phone and a data plan.
That's what we did
It
in
might
South
be cheaper
Africa.
than sending people
Yeah.
out there. Okay, did
Indeed.
you?
So
Okay.
I lived in South Africa for 2 years. I was living in Cape Town and I did a lot of research there. And it's interesting that you mentioned data plan because that is how we would pay them because data was really expensive.
Okay.
So people would agree to do research if you bought them a month worth of data. Then not only that would be their incentive and their ability to do the research, especially in the townships, etc. So that was a real, actually, funny you said, it was a genuine reward that we gave, and then we had to learn how to work differently in different cultures, etc. So I did this project as well, which was around kind of feature phones versus smartphones and people who had 2 phones and how did they use them and what did they use them for. And I mean, I think we can talk endlessly around this topic clearly, but I think,
yeah, absolutely.
but finding the right incentive, the right methodology, the right tools, and the thing I hate is, as much as I think AI is going to be valuable in research and already is, what I don't want us to do is to just kind of be like, I want to use this cool tool, so I'm going to do that research with that. So don't you lose the human-centeredness of your research planning, but go ahead and find the best possible newest tools you can, but don't be led by them.
Yeah,
so
that's very good. That's very good advice.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And for me personally, I think it's always about the goal. What's the goal?
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to get out of this? Okay,
Exactly.
and then we work backwards from there.
Indeed.
Then we find the right tools. We then find the right audience, and then so we make sure that we deliver against that goal in the end. Because, like
Yeah.
you say, it's very easy to run after the next shiny thing, such as
Yes.
synthetic humans, and using
Yeah.
them as a proxy
Proxy.
for doing research. But is that really going to give us the right
Yeah.
result?
Well, you
Maybe
can do a
if the whole piece is
combination.
about that we were creating a product for synthetic humans, and we need to interview
Yeah.
synthetic humans for that, then there's validity to it. But yeah, definitely, I would, like yourself, always get people to think twice about
Yeah.
using the cool new thing just for the sake
Yeah.
of using the cool new
Just for
thing.
the sake of it, use it, but as a solution, not as a starting point, if that makes
Uh,
sense.
Yeah,
And
exactly. And I think I will get burnt to the ground for this, but I would say it's
yeah.
always men that want to go after the cool new toy gadget. So yeah.
Yeah. The other thing we didn't cover, because of course we don't have time, we're already, I think, over in terms of people's patience to listen to us, maybe. But of course, accessibility and sustainability, and thinking in a
Yeah.
life-centered way, thinking about life-centered design, in kind of every step of the way. So getting different accessibility in, getting a huge variety of people, getting in that diversity in your research, thinking about the planet when planning the research, of course, which remote has been really good for in terms of kind of flights and travel and costs and all of that. So we haven't gone into those, but of course, thinking in a holistic, life-centered way is really important, rather than just the human-centered way that we've been doing research for the past few decades.
Amazing. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think we'd probably love to have you back again, actually, and talk about
And so,
those specific subjects. If you're up for that at another time, that'd be
yeah,
amazing. In terms of kind of what we've learned today, I think we've learned a huge amount of how research has obviously changed, how it was before pandemic, how it transitioned but over the pandemic, and now what are the types of methodologies and tools and just practices that you can use now and post pandemic, and using those two things together, right? The remote and the in real life as well together, how you can use it effectively. Where can people find more about you, Arunima?
so LinkedIn. So you look up Arunima Kapoor Duque on LinkedIn. I think that's probably the
Okay.
easiest, because I have an unusual name, and also kind of an Indian name, and then a foreign one. So I think the combo. I don't think there is many others with that exact name. So if you look that up, of course, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's the easiest. I do use social, but I use it, the social media I use for personal, not for professional. So I do that boundary. So yeah, I guess boring also, I'm middle-aged, only only using the professional platform professionally.
Excellent. And any plans
Yeah.
to publish out your handbooks or any of those things? Could we maybe see some of that in the
Yes.
future, or is
The
that yet to be
well,
decided?
no, the issue with those is that they were all done for specific clients at a specific company. So it's not stuff that I own.
Ah,
So I can't publish it because, of course,
yeah,
if Ford paid for that work, it is their work and theirs only. So
of
of course
course.
I learned from it, and it's in my head, and I have access to them because we made them. But of course, IDEO and Ford would own that, so I can't share it, unfortunately. But a lot of these things, that's the problem, that you can't actually, unless you do it yourself. Because if other people have paid for it and it's been a team effort, everything I've talked about has involved lots of different people and companies. So I can't make that publicly available, unfortunately. But that gives me an idea that I should probably do something that I can publish. That's mine.
I think a lot of people benefit from it. Yeah,
Yeah.
from your experience, I think a lot of people benefit, and
Yeah.
obviously they already have, right? We've seen that in your
Yeah.
career. You've had a great career, and still going on to have a great career as well.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us,
Thank
and
you.
thank you all for listening. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you very much, Arunima.
Thank you. Thank you, James. I had a lovely time. See you soon.
Thanks. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye bye.